What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, and we got the OGs here today, Matt Moreno, Daniel Starkand, and we're talking Max Scherzer. An interesting day for Max Scherzer yesterday on his return to Dodger Stadium. We'll get into the ejection and the sticky stuff and all that, but let's just sort of set the stage for what we had talked about might be an interesting day for Scherzer. For those unfamiliar or who need reminding, Scherzer is acquired by the Dodgers with Trey Turner in 2021. He puts together an incredible stretch. He makes 8 starts, 0.88 ERA. The team won all of his starts. It was the first guy ever to do that in his first starts with a new team. But then the postseason came. He throws 110 pitches in game 2 of the NLDS, closes out game 5. Everyone's happy. Scherzer's amazing. He's the best. Well, the NLCS comes. He throws 4 1/3 in game 2 and then ends up being scratched from game 6, in which the Dodgers were eliminated. And then he blamed the Dodgers for it and says that they had lowered his capacity by giving him extra off days. As a result, his arm didn't respond the way that he was accustomed to. He ended up walking back the comments a little bit when he was signed with the Mets. Matt, it sounds like he walked those comments a little bit back when talking to Dodgers media in the last couple of weeks. But what did he say to the Dodgers media? And then what was the reception like for Scherzer in a weird weekday day game?
Yeah, so when he was back at Dodger Stadium, obviously the series started Monday, and he wasn't going to be pitching for a couple of days. So he spoke with some reporters, and he said nothing but good things about the Dodgers. He had great memories during his time. He enjoyed getting to experience the Dodgers Giants rivalry, and especially in the postseason, which was a first for the two franchises. And his first start with the Dodgers obviously also came against the Astros in their first visit to Dodger Stadium with fans in attendance since the whole cheating scandal from the World Series. And, that was a raucous environment. And I think Scherzer's, high intensity approach, like it just kind of matched well with that. And it was, yeah, see, I agree.
Speaking of high intensity.
And so, he said, that was a fond memory. And he also acknowledged that, his time with the Dodgers didn't end the way everybody sort of expected and wanted. Obviously, they fell short of a World Series. And in terms of him not being able to pitch, it was the first time that in the NLCS, it was the first time he revealed that the shoulder arm trouble that prevented him from making that game 6 start was because of the rotator cuff. And, I think for any pitcher, rotator cuff is obviously a serious an issue, and especially for somebody who was in his position, going into free agency. And what he also said was that he told Mark Prior that if they want him to pitch, he will, but that him and Walker Buehler were throwing together on the off day. And he said, looking at Walker, like he looks like the better option. And so that's kind of how that came to be. And obviously, unfortunately for Walker Buehler, his kind of career trajectory has been in decline since making that start on short rest.
Daniel, for you, how do you remember Max Scherzer's time with the Dodgers? Is it a positive one? Is it a negative one? Is it a neutral one? Because, again, on one hand, the most absurd 8-game stretch, honestly, that most franchises will have ever seen. I mean, he's the first pitcher to make his first 8 starts with the team and have an ERA as low as he had it. The Dodgers won all 8 of those starts. They're chasing down the Giants. And yet, then you have the postseason, not only the postseason failure, but then the sort of blame game, saying that the Dodgers kind of cooked his arm afterwards. So for you, how do you remember Scherzer's time with LA?
I mean, I think it's fair to give him credit for how well he pitched, and especially in that specific season when the Dodgers needed every win. I mean, they still didn't end up catching the Giants, but they beat the Giants in the postseason, and Max Scherzer played a large role in that. So you thank him for that. But the way I look at Max, he's just kind of like that guy who, in his eyes, is never at fault for anything. Like, it's always someone else's fault if you ask Max. And I don't know. I just don't really like people like that. Like, he could have said he was injured and all that without blaming the Dodgers. Like, injuries happen. It's part of the game. He's getting older. He threw a lot of innings that season. Like, that's all perfectly understandable. Like, you don't need to point the finger at anyone. And we'll get into the sticky stuff, but it was kind of the same thing with that, where it's like, this umpire screwed up. I did nothing wrong. Like, my hand is the stickiest he's ever seen it, but I did nothing wrong here. Like, I just feel like he's one of those guys that in his mind, he could do no wrong. So while I do appreciate, the time, what he did in that season with the Dodgers, it's not like I view him as like, a Dodger great or anything. Like, his comments have definitely left, a sour taste in my mouth, I'd say.
I'm going to be honest. I had to go back and remind myself of how good he was in those 8 starts, because all I remember is that they cooked my arm and like they gave me too much rest and it was their fault. And so it is like, I would say I don't view him negatively, but I think if he had like sort of built up a bunch of equity in a very short amount of time, he erased all of that equity to where now he's neutral. Like, I don't dislike Max Scherzer, but I also don't think of him like, man, do you remember, like Hanley Ramirez or Manny Ramirez? Like, these guys had incredible short stretches for the Dodgers, like small bits of time. I mean, Hanley was obviously here for longer, but like, I'll remember, I'm like, wow, those guys were real. They had stretches where they were incredible. And Scherzer could have been that type of player in my estimation. And he blew it by the way that he talked about it, even if he's trying to walk things back after the fact. Let's talk, though, about sort of the Major League Baseball headline from yesterday's game, which is that Scherzer gets ejected. Here's the series of events that led to this. He was ejected coming out to pitch the 4th inning, but prior to that, coming out for the 2nd inning, after the 2nd inning, he was asked to go wash his hands because his hands were too sticky. In the 3rd inning coming out, he was asked to go wash his hands again and to come back with a new glove. So that's after pitching the 2nd inning, which he does. Coming back out for the 4th inning, his hands were inspected again. He claims he was using only rosin and sweat, which is legal. It's also worth noting that his spin rates in this game were not abnormally high, which is typically how sticky stuff tends to impact things. And yet, coming out to pitch the 4th inning, he's ejected. Umpire Dan Bellino, who is the home plate umpire, said that it was the stickiest it has been since he has been inspecting hands in the past 3 seasons, that it was far more sticky than he has ever seen, that this went too far, and that it went over the line. It is worth noting that Phil Cuzzi, who was the umpire on the first base side, I believe, who was doing the hand inspections every inning and who initiated this whole thing, baseball doesn't exist. That's a Twitter account has pointed out that Cuzzi has been involved in all 3 ejections for sticky stuff since this rule has come about. So, Matt, when you look at all the information we have there, the spin rate wasn't high. The same guy is involved every time on one hand. And yet an umpire, the home plate umpire, not Phil Cuzzi, saying it's the most sticky stuff we've ever seen. What do you do? What do you make of this?
I don't. It's a mess, and I'll say it's a mess. I'll stop short of saying it's a sticky situation to not get the groans for the pun.
Is that really stopping short of saying that?
But it's interesting because Scherzer, he was in his post-game interview, he was adamant that it's just rosin and sweat that he was using. He said he washed his hands in the dugout with alcohol in front of an MLB official who was down there. And, he also said that he was telling the umpires, like, I swear on my kids' lives that it's just, rosin and sweat. So,
well, if he said that, then we got to believe him. No matter what you say after that, it's got to be true.
I would hope, obviously, I don't have enough of a personal relationship. I didn't get to be around Max Scherzer enough because, like, his time with the Dodgers was very brief. I would hope that he wouldn't say that and be lying just because I think that's like a foul thing to like put out there.
Yeah.
But then, like you said, the umpires, like, and I forget if it was Dan Bellino or Cuzzi, but one of them said, they understand the gravity of throwing out a pitcher, especially somebody like Max Scherzer. And so that's not something they're going to take lightly when they're doing these sticky checks. And the other side of it is, like you said, because he's been part of all 3 of them, and I'm fairly certain the first 2 weren't like overturned and found to be like necessarily incorrect type thing. Like, oh no, he was actually wrong. Like, we're not going to suspend the pitcher. So he's got like a little bit of a track record there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's tough. Like I don't, like I said, I don't want to believe Scherzer would say, I swear on my kids' lives and be lying about that. But also if you dig further into, some of his career history, he was implicated in the Angels, I think visitors, clubhouse manager, Bubba Watkins, and like the sticky stuff he was making for pitchers. So, that's not a great look when you then look at this. But then again, like, I don't see how, if he's claiming like I washed my hands in front of an MLB official, that he still was getting away with something. And like he also said, like, he'd have to be pretty dumb to still continue to do it because they were telling him like, we're going to check you again.
Yeah, I actually side with Scherzer on all of this. Like, when I hear that Cuzzi's been involved with all 3, that's not a great sign. The fact, to your point, Matt, that they checked him coming out of the 2nd inning, coming into the 3rd inning, he knew he was going to be checked in the 4th inning. He's right when he says he would have to be a total idiot to cheat and to be still doing this. And the last piece, which is the most important one to me, is the spin rate wasn't high. Like, the whole point of cracking down on sticky stuff was that it wasn't about sticky stuff. It was about spin rate. It was about making yourself into a better pitcher. And I believe he was asked at one point, like, hey, do you think umpires should be able to go look at your spin rate numbers, and if they're not abnormally high, to continue to allow you to do whatever you're doing. I think that's interesting. So, Daniel, for me, when I look at the evidence, and I'm not going to die on either hill here, but I actually tend to side with Scherzer, and part of me would be surprised if the 10-game suspension that he automatically receives for being ejected for sticky stuff will actually hold up. Now, I know what you said earlier, that he's always blaming other people, and I think that's a fair take as well. So do you care? Like, I mean, do you feel strongly one way or another on, was this his fault, or is this an umpire overreaching?
I mean, I think I believe Max when he says that it was only rosin and sweat. But also, like, he was given multiple warnings and they said it was the stickiest it's ever been. Yeah. So it's not like he can't say he went and washed his hands off and he was all clean and then comes out the next inning and they say it's the stickiest it's ever been. And they check every pitcher every game. So they've checked a lot of hands. So for them to say it's the stickiest it's ever been, like, there's something there. And I'm not saying it's more than sweat and rosin, but it could just be an excessive amount of sweat and rosin. And if he was told, he was warned, multiple times that he needs to clean it up, and he didn't. That doesn't mean he was cheating, but he still was doing, too much with the rosin. So I'm kind of neutral, I guess. Like, I'm not super mad at Max Scherzer and calling him a cheater and saying he should be suspended for 80 games or anything, to that level. But I also don't think the umpire has some vendetta against Max Scherzer where he saw a completely fine hand and said, no, like, we're going to toss you out. Like, I definitely think the umpires saw something there. So yeah. I think the 10-game suspension is fine. Like, he'd miss a start or two. It's not anything crazy. It's not a position player missing 10 games. And I just think if the umpire tells you, it's excessive, then it's excessive. Like, they're kind of the judge and what they say goes. So you have to listen to them. And obviously Max didn't. Like, I really don't think there was some vendetta against Max Scherzer here. I just think his hand was too sticky and he, didn't really take the measures needed to fix it.
Yeah. And I will add, by the way, Dan Bellino, who says, hey, it's the worst we've ever seen it. Would any of us be surprised if he was just having Phil Cuzzy's back because Phil Cuzzy wanted to eject him and then they eject him? And if you wanted to justify an ejection after the fact and defend your guy, Phil Cuzzy, like, that's the type of thing you would say. Again, I'm no disrespect to Dan Bellino and his family and friends. Okay. We're not calling the guy a total fraud, but
we all know what that means.
Yeah. Umpires are going to stick up for one another. So it's worth noting that as well. Let us know what you think in the comments below. I would love to hear from fans on two things. One is, what do you think about Max Scherzer, the player, after his complicated time with the Dodgers? And second, do you think he was cheating? I mean, was the temper tantrum that he threw on Kids Day at Dodger Stadium a justified one? If you missed it, Matt has a video that he recorded up on his Twitter account that it's just really funny because it does look like, without hearing anything, it looks like my 6-year-old throwing a temper tantrum is what it looks like. So was he justified in throwing a temper tantrum? Let us know in the comments below. Check out DodgerBlue.com for all sorts of information on stuff like this. And please subscribe, ring the notification bell here on YouTube as well. That's Matt. That's Daniel. My name is Jeff. As always, enjoy your day and go Dodgers.